So we ended up joining another mastermind group called Think Multifamily, which really opened the gates in regards to deal flow, relationships, knowledge, etc., which all enabled us to be able to take down our own deals.
The majority of people trade time for money in the hopes of building wealth. I'm here to tell you that the traditional methods don't cut it anymore. Welcome to the Passive Income Power Podcast. My name is Doug Earthman. My partner Mickey Bernstein and I are going to dive deep into the power that passive income can have on your quality of life. We're going to discuss alternative assets, strategies, and insights through interviews with the very people who have found freedom through their power. I hope you enjoy this episode of the Passive Income Power Podcast. All right, thank you for tuning in to the Passive Income Power Podcast. I'm your host, Doug Earthman, and today we have our friend Jeffrey Donis here with us. And Jeffrey and his brothers, Kenneth and Kerwin, are real estate investors and syndicators out of North Carolina. You have a fascinating story from starting wholesaling and single-family residence in college to dropping out and becoming syndicators. We'll talk about that shortly, but I wanted to give you a chance to introduce yourself really quick. Welcome, Jeffrey.
Thanks for having me, Doug. It's awesome to be here. I know we've connected multiple times, so it's great to finally be on. My name's Jeffrey Donis, as you mentioned. I live in Durham, North Carolina. I'm currently 21 years old, and my two brothers and I got started in real estate about 3 years ago now. It's actually been a little bit more than that, but we initially got into it, as you mentioned, through single family. We were primarily doing wholesaling as well as some different strategies like creative financing, as well as fix and flips. So after the first year into the journey, we ended up transitioning into syndication. And just to give you a little background as to what inspired us to get into real estate at such a young age, my two brothers and I grew up with a single mother, and it was low income growing up in regards to the financial situation that we were in. And not to say that with the idea of, it being some type of limiting belief, but it's what really sparked a desire and interest in being financially free, knowing that growing up, we had enough, but it wasn't always a lot. And I think a lot of people in this country have that desire. A lot of people in the world, really. So my mom specifically comes from an even, more humbler beginning than I do. She was from Guatemala, and she grew up in a very, very impoverished neighborhood where she lived. It was a third world country, and it still is. So being from that location, she came here and did better for herself. And our goal is to do that for our future generations, which was one of the major and biggest reasons as to why we got into real estate.
That's so cool, man. And I forgot that you were 21. For some reason, I thought you're 23 or 24, just because I guess I've been chatting with you for a little while now. And that's just so cool that y'all are getting started at such a young age. I wasn't even thinking about that kind of stuff when I was 21. I was pretty engulfed in having a good time, and not saying that you're not having a good time, but that was my focus. I wanted to go where the fun was, where the party was, and all of that, building wealth, that'll happen in the future at some point when I graduate and get a good job. And that's just really awesome that y'all have gotten started at such an early age. And just to do a little calculation really quick. So it seems like you got started right around 18 years old. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. And you started out doing some wholesaling. Can you touch on the journey from wholesaling to syndication and what that looked like for you and your brothers? How did you even know about wholesaling?
For sure. So to give you a little bit more into the background, we all got started in real estate at the same time. My older brother, this was over 3 years ago, he was in his college dorm room. So to give you more insight, all three of us were at our respective universities in North Carolina, meaning we weren't at the same school, but we weren't too far. I want to say we were an hour and a half to 2 hours. I was probably the furthest. So I went to a university called University of North Carolina at Wilmington. My twin brother went to Chapel Hill, which is the big school in the UNC system, and then my older brother went to Greensboro, a part of the UNC system as well. So he was in his dorm room, sitting down, watching YouTube videos, and one after finishing one video, the next one immediately played. So he it just so happened, right, and I don't think it was a coincidence that a podcast came on. It's really more of a sitcom where these hosts, and the show is called The Breakfast Club. These hosts would interview different guests. These could be rappers, artists, business owners. In this case, it was a wholesaler. And the wholesaler was an African American individual who comes from a low income background, and he had built a multi-million dollar company. That was something that intrigued my brother because we were very, very similar in the sense of being a minority or Hispanic, coming from a low income background and wanting to become financially free. So he found out about what it was through that YouTube video and eventually started listening to podcasts. And as you know, once you jump into that rabbit hole, it leads you to so many different resources and books, podcasts. So we started listening to other wholesaling podcasts as well as reread Rich Dad Poor Dad, started listening to Bigger Pockets. All of these things are what really set the foundation of our knowledge and allowed us to be able to go and start to take action so that we could get our first deal. So we were all at our schools, as I mentioned, and obviously as a full-time student, you only have a certain amount of time that you can put towards a business. So we were each cold calling for about 2 hours, and we learned how to do the pulling lists of data, skip tracing, which is when you try to find the phone number attached to the name on a property after you have the address. And then we would pretty much input that into a automatic dialer, because at first we were hand dialing, meaning we would type in the number on our phones, but that took so long, and we realized quickly that it's a numbers game. So the more people we can talk to, the quicker we could find a good deal. Now, to give you a little bit more understanding as to what wholesaling is, I'm sure you know this, Doug, but for anyone in your audience that doesn't, we were looking to contact some type of motivated seller, meaning they had some reason that they would be willing to sell it at a discount to us. And we were trying to get it under contract and then assign the rights to the contract, also known as equitable interest, over to another party. It typically was a fix and flipper. So we could only cold call for about 2 hours a day at school, and that was good, but it wasn't getting us that first deal. Now, I see this as a blessing. Obviously, this was a terrible time in our country, the 2020 pandemic, COVID, but the pandemic hit that year, and we were all sent home because of it in regards to the dorm and rooming situation. None of my brothers and I were allowed to actually stay there anymore because of the quarantine. So we all were back at home and couldn't go anywhere. So instead of just doing nothing, we were cold calling from 9 to 8 pretty much all day. And we started getting a lot of leads, which led us to getting our first deal in wholesaling. So our first deal was our biggest deal we ever did in that space. And it took us 6 months to get it. It took us lots of calls and lots of hours, but eventually we got it. And after that first year, just to give you a fast forward, that was a big year for single family. For us, we were pretty much solely doing wholesaling and creative financing. Creative financing, I just mean subject to and owner financing. And we learned how to do that by joining a mastermind group by Pace Morby. So it taught us those skills. And after that, we learned about syndication through another podcast. And we decided that was what we wanted to focus on. So we ended up joining another mastermind group called Think Multifamily, which really opened the gates in regards to deal flow, relationships, knowledge, etc., which all enabled us to be able to take down our own deals.
Wow, that's a awesome series of events that led you to multifamily syndication, and that's the path you typically. It seems like people hear about it via some sort of medium like a podcast or interview. Uh,
Yeah,
Bigger pockets. I mean, I know that's how I really started consuming a lot of information and learning,
yeah,
and then going out there and trying to make it happen with wholesaling. I didn't do that, but I started really diving into single family rental and vacation rental research. Uh, and
mm,
that's what led me into looking bigger into syndication. but you also talked about the masterminds, and those have
Mm,
just, I'm in a mastermind. That's how we met, and
yep.
that has just been, as far as getting me to the next level. I feel like a mastermind for people that are really looking to jump into the space, and be in a little more active of a role. Masterminds are worth every penny. And
100%.
and another thing, so I joined the masterminds we're both a member of, and you reached out to me very early on. You just came right out, introduced yourself, contacted me, and were willing to help out in any way. And I really appreciated that and remember that, and love the community because there is so much giving involved. And
Yeah.
again, someone at your age being that forthcoming and giving is just remarkable. So really appreciate it, man.
Yeah.
Um, so tell me about some of your first multifamily deal and how that panned out.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, we joined Think Multifamily, and that was really what opened the door to getting into the space because initially when we got into it, we had that same approach as when we got into single family. So we thought we could just cold call and take a lot of action and do it ourselves. So we were calling these brokers who I forget how we got their number. It was a similar approach as to how you get any property owner's phone number by skip tracing and things like that. And quickly they kept asking us, how many deals have you done? We were calling brokers as well because before we actually jumped into the space and joined anything, we read the best ever apartment syndication book by Joe Fairless. And in it, he said going 100 plus units is something he recommends. So that's what we decided we wanted to do and focus on. And then he also mentioned in the book that if you're going to go 100 plus units, typically those deals are dealt with by brokers because brokers are sort of the ones that have access to all of these deals. They've built the relationships. So instead of us trying to go and find the deals ourselves, we decided it'd be smart to follow his advice and call the brokers themselves. So we tried that and we kept hitting these walls. They were asking us questions like, how many deals have you done? What's your track record? How are you going to raise your money? Where are you going to get your debt? Things like that. And we couldn't answer any of those questions. So we were like, okay, this isn't going to work. Another thing Joe Fairless talked about in this book was going and getting a mentor or someone you could partner with whose track record you could leverage. And that's when we started looking for a mentorship. So once we did that, we now had access to the partner who's going to partner with us, access to capital, access to debt, insurance, all of these things. And on top of it, knowledge, which comes through your network. So once I was in the group, I eventually networked with a few individuals, and that's when co-GP partnership opportunities came up. So the first deal was over 100 units in Jacksonville, Florida. We were a co-GP on that one. Currently, I think we closed on that one, I want to say almost 2 years ago. Yeah, we're getting close to 2 years now on that one, and it's been an awesome journey on that so far. Just by being a part of deals, a lot of people want to find their own deal at first, which I think is awesome. You should always be looking for deals, but if you've never done one, the best way and the most education that I've ever gotten is by actually doing something and by doing it, whatever it is I'm looking to do. So by being a co-GP, I'm on calls, I'm visiting the property, I'm doing whatever else the lead sponsors need. So when it comes down to that, on top of communicating with your own investors and raising money, you're able to take action and actually do things that will teach you a lot more than reading books or just looking for deals. Because at the end of the day, and a lot of people can underwrite, right? I'm not saying everyone can, but not a lot of people know what goes on behind the scenes, which is really what teaches you a lot. So that's a little bit about the first one. Happy to go into more details, but yeah.
Yeah. So what was your role as a co-GP in your first deal? Were you raising capital? What was your direct role?
Yeah, on the first one, we were pretty much helping with marketing on the front end, and then investor relations once we closed. So before you close, obviously no one's invested yet. You're really
Hmm.
just communicating with potential investors. So we were putting together email campaigns, helping with the investor deck, things like that. And obviously, this is our first deal. So we weren't expecting to get a piece of the asset management, for instance, on that one. There was a lot more experienced operators who were going to be handling that. We were really just happy to be there and have the opportunity to help. So we're doing what we
Awesome.
can, and on the back end, it's more so of investor relations and keeping our investors updated.
I definitely appreciate that jumping in and doing something really is the best way to figure it out. And it's not jumping in
Yeah,
blindly, it is jumping in after you've done your own due diligence and your own research and your own understanding. But, for me, I my first step into it was investing as a limited partner. And yeah, I'd done
yeah,
all the research, but actually going through the motions of investing as a limited partner, it brought all that research and all that information I'd found, it brought it all together and gave me a really like holistic understanding of the investment and the process. And
mm,
it was I learned way more from doing that first deal than I did from the 6 months or more of really digging in and trying to understand every bit of what was going on.
yeah. A lot of people seem like they want to find their own deal, and they want that to be their first deal. Which, as I mentioned, I think that's an awesome approach. But it helps when you're actually looking for your own deal if you've been a part of other deals, because you can talk to the broker and say you're a GP on this deal and you're looking to buy more, versus saying this will be the first deal I've ever done, but my partner has this, or something like that. It just adds to the credibility on top of your confidence and your education, because you'll learn a lot more by actually being a part of deals.
So from that co-GP position on your first deal, where have you gone since? How many deals have you done? And what is your role
Mhm.
transitioned into on the GP side?
Yeah. So the cool thing about our company is I work with my brothers, and we have our own respective rules. So I do the investor relations and capital raising. My twin brother does our marketing, which we kind of work hand in hand when it comes to investor relations and capital raising. And then my older brother handles our acquisitions and asset management. So we've co-GP'd on a few more deals after the first one, and our last deal that we did was the first one that we did as a lead sponsor. So we pretty much were the ones that sourced it. We did bring on other partners who helped with different things, and my brother is doing the asset management alongside another more experienced operator. But he's obviously doing it with him and getting a lot of experience by doing it. And then when it comes to our role now, it's pretty much I do the monthly updates, keeping the investors updated, answering any questions, and I also reach out on a quarterly basis to all of our investors. My twin brother's in charge of marketing for our company ongoing, and then looking for new investors. And my brother's really the one that once we close on a deal, outside of keeping investors updated, he's really the one getting on the weekly asset management calls, sort of leading the charge with the property manager to ensure that our business plan is being executed the way that we'd like it to be, and obviously trying to hit the returns that we're looking for.
So, with the current economic and interest rate environment, what are you seeing as far as pipeline, as well as have any of
Yeah,
your current projects been affected?
yeah. So in regards to current pipeline, we are looking, and we're always looking to buy our next deal. We are extra picky right now, so we have a certain criteria that we look at, and we've fine tuned it over the last few months. We initially, for example, were open to doing Class C deals built in the 70s. Now we're trying to shy away from the 70s vintage and focus more on an 80s product, which I think a lot of investors are also doing. On top of it, just like a lot of other people, we're always looking. I think it's important to keep your eyes open, not only because that lets you and allows you to keep a pulse on the market, but you're also maintaining the relationships with the brokers. So you may, we are submitting offers. We've submitted a few offers over the last few weeks. We almost always lose. We've lost on all of those, and that's typically how this works. You're submitting offers, and we're still getting out bidded. A lot of the times we just look at deals and they don't even make sense for us to submit on because prices haven't corrected enough, in our opinion. And we don't want to buy at a high price right now, especially with where things are in the economy. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity coming. And even if people say right now we might be in the correction, it might have already happened, which if that is the case, then, we're still going to be looking and eventually we will find something. With all of the bridge loans that are coming due in the next year, 12 to 18 months, we're confident there will be more opportunities. So that's why we really want to be picky right now. And I'd rather, pass on the deals that I would have to be aggressive on to actually be able to pay and win the deal. And I'd rather wait than, and maybe, see if we can win something else later in the year or next year that actually does make sense and meets our criteria versus overpaying right now and suffering the consequences for it later. But in regards to your second question, we I think a lot of deals right now in the market are being affected. On some of ours, cash flow has gone down. We had bridge loans on them. Fortunately, on most we have rate caps. So obviously you're suffering, whether that's with eviction problems. Like on one deal, we have it's in Atlanta actually, in one of the counties with the judicial system that's there. They first of all have had over like 12,000 evictions filed since COVID, which is a lot for even a county the size of Atlanta. But with that being an issue, there's been a lot of evictions that we've had at our property that we took over with the delinquency that we had when we first became owners, and going through that system has taken a lot longer than we had originally anticipated. So you can get creative in those environments. Obviously, there are little hiccups that you face, but you just have to find a way to get around those barriers and those walls. So, for instance, in this case, what we're doing is offering cash for keys, which is where you give the resident some type of cash amount to walk away and turn in the keys. There's other things that we've done like balance forgiveness, where we'll pretty much forgive any outstanding balance that they have or debt, anything that they haven't paid. We'll just say, you know what, we'll take this down to zero as long as you give us the keys and walk away. That will save them a hit on their credit, as well as just not having to pay it, right? Because eventually although it does take a long time, they will have to go through the eviction process, which never looks good and no one wants to do. So we try to give the resident multiple options, but that's stuff that we're dealing with, and I think we're not alone in that. Just trying to make sure we're decreasing our expenses. And right now it is lease up season, so we're seeing a lot more demand for our units. So we're trying to absorb as much of that as we can. So things are obviously a challenge, but I know you've heard this, Doug. Going into this downturn, people were saying asset management was going to be so important, and I couldn't agree more. And we're seeing that now with a lot of the deals that you're hearing in the news, kind of going back to the bank or potentially going to the bank. Not saying that was only because of poor management, but obviously I think management might have a big issue and a big cause, and has been a big cause of that. So yeah, we're pushing through it.
Awesome. Yeah, we're seeing the same thing in terms of we think there's a lot of opportunity on the horizon, but we're always looking to execute on a deal that makes sense now. There's some folks that are waiting for the exact conditions to jump in,
Yeah,
like the potential that we may see a fire sale with all the bridge debt coming due, but conditions can change. And if you're just sitting out waiting on that certain condition, you may be missing out on opportunities at the time.
yeah,
But I agree with you, just not going in aggressive, but being open to anything that makes sense at the time. So, what are some of being a 21-year-old business owner, investor? What are some of the challenges that you've had to face in that realm, and where have you had to get out of your comfort zone?
yeah. So you want me to take the approach of being a young investor? What have been some
Sure.
challenges? So for me, obviously being young, it's something that I can't change. But interesting, obviously being young in anything, you can't have that much experience because as much as a lot of other people in the space. Now, not to say that we aren't experienced, but it's not as experienced as maybe some people would like or as much as others. Now, the way that we overcame that obstacle was by partnering with other people who have a lot more experience and most importantly have a good and a great, really, track record. So when you're able to partner with others and leverage their track record, there's a book behind me that our mastermind actually gave us. And I think you got it, Doug. You should have. Called Who Not How.
Yep.
So that's how I think of it. It's not about really. It's not about what I know. Even it's about who I know and who I can partner with. Because as long as I'm doing what I'm good at, I have other people that are good at what they are. They're good at what they're doing. I can leverage that, and that's why it's so important to have a solid team around you, especially when you're young. So that goes into the few problems that we faced is credibility, which we've built not only through educating ourselves, joining mastermind groups, surrounding ourselves with awesome people, but we've also I take this very seriously, and through the education and podcasts and mastermind groups, that obviously educate yourself. But another thing we've done is on social media. We're on YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn. We have a website. All of these things, believe it or not, is an online presence, and people nowadays they will look you up and they'll see us pretty much anywhere and everywhere. And we've been on a lot of shows. We've done a lot of blogs. I pretty much on putting content out there as a thought leader, right? I'm trying to educate the audience with some type of value and bring value to the audience. So by doing that, you're positioning yourself as a thought leader. So typically they don't even know how old I am. Similar to as you mentioned, you thought I might have been in my little bit later 20s. A lot of people don't even know how old I am, first of all. They'll say I look young, but they typically don't question my youth. They'll just look at me online and think, oh, this guy has to be like in his late 20s or early 30s, right? On top of that, in regards to another challenge, it's raising money, which all of those things I just mentioned help me raise money. Because when I talk to an investor, typically they've already looked me up online or found me through a podcast that I was on. So when someone hears me speaking on a podcast, they immediately assume I'm a credible person. And not to say I'm this like trickster and this
Yeah.
person that's not what I'm saying I am. I actually am. That's why you look me up online. I'm actually talking about what I do and what it is I do. And we have videos and we're going on these tours. We're meeting these brokers. We're talking about the problems that we're having and how we're overcoming them. And through the content, we're sort of giving people what it is, what we know, and what we're trying to accomplish, and all of these things. And they start to really paint the picture of, okay, regardless of this person's age or what I think their ages, they know at least look like they know what they're talking about. So it's worth me getting on a call with them. And once I do that, it just comes down to having a good conversation and building a relationship. And we do that, I think, just as good as anyone. So that's how I've been able to do it. It's really no secret. It's a mixture of a lot of things.
Yeah, I've seen y'all. You talk at conferences. You have a great podcast. You're always pushing out the content, and that's just I know for me getting into this space and doing all of those things, it's jumping outside of my comfort zone. And it seems like y'all have really
Mm.
embraced just diving in and being vulnerable and doing those things. And I think that's really taking y'all to the next level. Y'all are recognized in this space as being just a bunch of young, hungry guys that are, finding success and actively creating success. And I've been honored to, uh, you know, be in contact with you and chat with you, and you've been such a great help to me. So I really appreciate it. And yeah, man, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your knowledge and your story with our audience. If there's a way, any way for them to get in touch with you, to chat, listen to your podcast, your YouTube channel, tell them how they can get in touch with you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the kind words too, Doug. It's been an awesome uh, journey, getting to know you more and more, and I look forward to doing it even more. In regards to where you can find us, my brother created an awesome checklist for anyone in the audience that's looking to vet any passive investment opportunity that you're looking or potentially looking into, you can visit it at www.donisinvestmentgroup.com/checklist. And to visit our website, it's just the same link without the /checklist. You can find us on social media at Donis Brothers on every platform. And then you can find me at Jeffrey Donis. And then our podcast is The Real Estate Monopoly on every podcast platform.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for giving us some time and sharing your knowledge. And I want to thank everyone for listening to this episode of the Passive Income Power Podcast. And let us help you find your passive income superpower. Thanks.
Thank you for watching the Passive Income Power Podcast. We hope you gained wealth building insights. I will ask you to do 3 things to help us serve you best. Go to our website at 2dinvestments.com, click on Investors Club, and fill out the basic information to have timely access to new offerings. 2, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And 3, feel free to set up a call with Doug or Mickey through our website. We would love to help you find your personal superpower.